I was just listening to Mike. I think his name is Mike. I haven't seen enough of his videos to know for sure. I think it's Mike Figueredo. Um, he has a channel called the Humanist Report, which he's really good. He's very good at getting to the substance heart of what's going on in people's emotions in regards to how political forces move in before us, on on the medias and what we see and what we really need. And this time he's talking about a People's Party, and yeah, it's I have no doubt that there's a mass amount of people who, for the past year, have been wanting something else. It's not the Democrats or the Republicans, and the whole notion of how they have fixed their positioned themselves in Washington and installed themselves in all the the networks of finances and military um, industrial complex and lobbies and everything, and how they're not budging. They got the they got Washington monopolized, and so there's hardly any wishes, any true democracy, any ideas, any sentiment that come from the population of the country making it to Washington anymore. It's been for, it's a whole subject about. I'm interested in the subject of voting and what democracy is supposed to allow for and create in the world, and the reality of it really ending up being about those who hold power and they controlling government, and we're made to do this little song and dance number that we all go along with and chime in and say, yeah, we are represented, we vote, and blah 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 blah. But what you see, by pulling back and looking at the world, is that the people in power are a social class that bring themselves up from university, from their social class, from their economic classes, and relationships of friendships, and the parents and the mentors and the teachers and the people in power and the companies they work for, and there's a whole segment of society that goes towards leading the country, and then there's the masses of people, and really our will and our ideas are really not making it to government, although that's what we're supposed to believe, and that's what they sell us, that uh, government represents the people. In any case, but these are really hard ideas to talk about for people to understand, and you can maybe this might make sense to a lot of people, but to actually visualize it in the sense that you would visualize a physical model or an architectural model where you see the parts and you understand how this flows there and how this moves over here and there and how this grows and how this diminishes. To visually see it is difficult for the average person or for anybody. And he said something just now, Mike, that grabbed my attention, which is he compared other countries because he's talking about how we need to pass legislature to create um, uh, to change the what's it called, the electorate something college, or legislation to make it easy for a third party to grow and gain power. He talks a lot about power, and so I'm really sensing that he's really starting to um, tap around the real uh, the mantle, the lava mantle. He's talking about power, and he's talking about um, what happens in other countries, and that's really important that we understand comparisons. That helps people a great deal when we look at a situation in our country, how we're stuck with two parties, and why it's so difficult. What happens with the electorate representation or whatever. I'm not too sure how to describe all that part. I know conceptually what it's about, but in any case, and then we compare it to what happens and he mentions Japan and other countries, and I'm familiar with what happens in Argentina, and we saw kind of the same landslide when the Peronists took back power from the radical liberal pro-America, pro-globalization Macri. Um, we saw how immediately the thing with Argentina is that you people talk about it and you start smelling it, you start hearing it in the air. This is going to happen. It's going to happen. Here in the States, it doesn't happen that way. People talk a lot about it, but it doesn't. You don't feel a direct connection to what is materializing or what will materialize as the result of the election. You're always There's this huge invisible world behind it. You really don't have a confirmation until you get the results. But in Argentina, you do kind of, you feel the momentum, you feel the inertia of, and still, nonetheless, um, it seems that there wasn't a chance for others that weren't, the liberal radicals, pro-globalization, pro-America, Macri, they call Cambiemos, let's change is the name of the party. Um, which was actually a name created to appeal to those who were sick of corruption and all the stories of Cristina Fernandez stealing money and however much that was exaggerated and however much was true. There was a split that was created in the country, and so he capitalized on the hate for what was already had come to be believed as a certain narrative about Peronists. And so the country also, in a completely different way, was split in two hemispheres. And then Mike mentioned Japan, I think, and you mentioned other countries, but how they do have things structured in ways that corporations don't have so much leverage. Oh, South Africa, he mentioned that they designed ways that the lobbies won't force the binary or this polarity to happen. But in the end, the same party ends up prevailing and they stay in power. Nobody can move it. And it's really useful for all of us to understand this because all the problems that have to do with our social political problems in our countries have to do with human nature. We have to understand how the emotional, psychological human being causes things to be a certain way, and that's the only way we're gonna be able to change and design better means. And one thing, I don't want to hog up the time introducing because what I would like is for you guys to listen to him. So I just want to say really quickly um, that it seems, why do people vote for the ones that have power, the ones that are popular? Why don't so many people in the States, he points out, want to have an alternative, want to have an independent party win, or these people are saying such great things. He mentioned um, forgiving student debt or alleviating all these great ideas that everybody wants. Everybody has huge debts, and yet when the chips are down, they don't vote for that person. What's going on? And so, what is going on has to do with what needs to be understood about the human mind. That's where the answers are. We need to understand what happens to people, why we're insecure. We don't know what they're doing up there, behind those white walls in Washington. And all we want is to feel that we have some power, that we're not going to be the losers, that we're going to be with the winners. And there's these types of um, reactions, psychological concerns that subconsciously and quietly happen in our mind, and that's why we end up. And we're very shallow, especially in the States. We don't understand exactly how everything works. And just to conclude, and it will make sense after you listen to what he says. Um, what I think it behooves all countries, all peoples who are conceiving the idea of transforming and changing the world towards more modern notions of government is to understand that we have to mechanically fix um, the idea of distributing power. Because if we leave it to society to generate the power, which is what happens through these systems that we call representative systems, which cajole us into thinking that we produce some kind of direction in who goes to power. But in reality, it's the other way around. The power and the selection is had already at the top, and then we kind of play the role. We play this game that we're putting our 2 cents towards the functioning of this. But in reality, the decisions that we end up making have to do more with our human nature, not with the effectiveness of any system of government. And so we end up fueling the powers that be, the way the power structure has been established, and power is so sought. Everybody wants it, and once you have it, and you have money, and you have wealth, and you have power over the lives of others, it's people grab onto it and they become capricious and they lie to not give it up, and we that's our human side, and so we can't trust a system to just we can't trust ideologies, ideas, concepts to by virtue of their noble concept to distribute power of government equally and fairly or perfectly or well distributed. We have to design systems that do not allow for unbalance. And then we'll have in these spaces of artificially or mechanically maintained equal power, which could be, let's say, 5 political parties, 5 spaces, 5 places that we will always have to choose from, will be the substance that we will choose who of the 5 or who of the 3, if we want to talk about a people's party that is happening now, that a lot of people are talking about in the States, we will look at these 3 equal, and the structure of voting, of how they come to, to the platform, to exposure, to funding. I don't know, funding. I feel that funding should all these things that are connected to capitalism should be severed. There should be no interest for maintaining, for my powerful self to keep power, to give power to other people so that I maintain my power, and the whole thing is fueled and moved by the lesser sides of human nature. And so we're not going to change as a creature. We are what we are, and we have this amazing intelligence, but we carry with us, inseparable to our high intelligence, the attributes of our primitive animalistic or human nature. And so we really need to rise to the occasion of saying, hey, this is, there's an average tendency that this will happen sooner or later. If you give enough people this much power and enough people get distracted, the human being will end up always going this way. We have to acknowledge and own up to ourselves what kind of creature we are, so that our ideas of high intelligence and greatness and fairness and wonderful distribution of the fruits of our intelligence, of our sciences, of everything, are able to make it out per our ideologies, per our high expectations that everybody will access. We are thinking that the fruits of our intelligence will reach everybody through these systems that are more about moral hopes and ideologies that in concept are about fairness, and it's also ephemeral. It's not this. Nothing guarantees that the buck will get there. That the food will get to that plate, and people get scared because the English language has proliferated a propaganda and a fear against everything as socialism and communism, and for whatever reasons, this is what has been taught, and so one of the weaknesses of one of our things that we inherit as a species, as a creature, is an easy tendency to to confront and to split in polarity and confrontation. And this, I don't want to get into something really scientific and about evolution, but there are reasons about evolution and how we have been forming on this planet for that explain why we so easily don't consider the subtleties, the complex circumstantial variations of things that happen on this earth. We tend to want to see what team we join, and who to go against, and who to be with. And this characteristic is actually kind of a ball and chain, because when you start looking at the day only for how many hours of daylight and how many hours of nighttime you're going to have, you're not really living in how the day unfolds and what a day on this earth is all about. You need to understand wind and variations, and there could be so much cloud cover that it could be like nighttime, but it's not nighttime, and so there's a whole painting, there's a whole variation of depth and three-dimensionality that is the reality of existence, our existential condition. Everything that has to do with society and humanity can be explained as an organism that moves and changes through time, like a day unfolding with animals and clouds, but this to live that intelligence is not what language and human logic, and with all our great ideas, is prone to do. We do start moving closer to a capacity that we would have to understand a more organic, ample, three-dimensional, moving, changing reality of changing circumstances of reality. But as soon as there's stress or pressure or difficulty or suffering and pressure and fear and suspicion, we revert to getting out of there. It's something that happens because of how we evolved. And so it's anything that's uncomfortable to social peace and congeniality of existence with others, and threatens that with a problem of any kind, will make us immediately go towards a linear, binary kind of polar mindset, where we have a problem, we got to attack it. Does this mean problem? Okay, it's on that side. Does this mean problem? No, it isn't. Okay, it's on that side. And so as a result, governments that would aspire to administrate an organic collective species that could feasibly live without order. It has already a natural social order. We would be able to roam in a valley, but we have this high intelligence that immediately causes problems, and so government and administration and laws and rules came about because we're too smart for our own good. We're too precocious for our own good. Our injustices are not just like, I'm hungry, I'm taking that animal's food. Our injustices are human. Compared to animal, it means that, we'll go and rob a whole family's winter, or do horrible, intense things, with our capacity for engineering and chemical and biology and chemistry. And so it's so much, and systems, in other words, it's so much greater, our intelligence, compared to the intelligence of animals. where their harms, how they harm one another is fleeting. It's forgotten right away. It's resolved. They just kind of go away from each other. We know we have a situation. We've been thrown into an animalistic body, a base of organic existence, which though brings with it a natural ability to live congenially as a society without worked out, hammered out systems. We must resort to this intelligence to create those systems, because by the same token, our ills and our afflictions upon one another are just that much devastating. We don't know any limits. We Everything is like 100,000 times larger and worse than the next animal down from us on this planet. And also because we are ambitious and we want to have a lot of pleasure and free time and enjoyment and exploration of artistry and creativity to flourish. And so when we find ways of doing things without suffering, without so much toiling, and with more time, if we find somebody else to do it, which is then it starts again, we start falling into a more primitive side. But in any case, we invent, we like our intelligence. And so it's ironic that we use this intelligence to create systems that would enhance what we can already do with more challenge, with more explosiveness, let's just say. Yet we are capable, and yet we haven't learned to create administrations that understand us as a species, know exactly where we won't be able to do that well, or and what we've done is we just kind of separate people. The ones that are acting up too much, we put them away and we lock them up in cement buildings. It's horrible. We are hurting ourselves more with government than helping ourselves as a species. And without talking about how brutal we are about punishment and judgment, which that has roots in other areas of civilization, religion, morality, and stuff that has been haunting us for thousands of years. Without looking at all that, we have been brutally unfair, and only the people who were reaping the benefit of all our systems and agriculture and what have you, then came money and always the same situation. A small group gets to enjoy it all, and then masses, larger numbers of people are suffering, don't get enough, are ignored, omitted, neglected, etc. And when we started getting more intelligent in the human sciences and we started coming up with sociology and psychology a century and a half ago, all of a sudden intellectuals started connecting. Well, that means that towards society, which means government should consider this more and not be happy about this always reoccurring. And so socialistic Marxist ideas in the whole family, I don't want to say Marxist, I don't want to say, there was a whole school of intellectual thought that was happening because we were becoming more intelligent in the human sciences that started proposing new ways that would not be so unfair and so ill badly proportionately configured, that somehow, and we never were able to see that we were trying to make a better systems of government for humanity. Instead, we started making teams, and we said that team is trying to destroy what we got going, and so they're our enemy, and we placed it at the same level. But in reality, all of the political thoughts and social, civil principles that would lead to politics that came up around the time of Marx and all the other thinkers and intellectuals of that time in Germany and Russia and England too, and Europe, um, we're we're starting to talk about, we're starting to speak as a, we're starting to be the voice of an evolutionary step that humanity was taking, that was finally acknowledging that we've always been really backwards in every single type of government we've always made, whether it be feudal or capitalism, we called it capitalism, or based on money and, whatever. And unfortunately, they couldn't hear that. And if we saw it as, if we think of the species as producing what it does as one collective that's growing and evolving in the universe, we can more easily start seeing why things occurred and what brought about. I mean, we know these things, but um, it's just always easier to fall into the fight, isn't it? We just fall into this thing of taking sides. Take your sides, take your place, pick up your weapons, and then everybody can feel their little the little effort that that requires for their minds. And it's, I'm not saying that that there's a way out of it, but somehow we need to understand that higher ideas, better ideas for a government is a good thing. to to say we want everybody to have the highest quality of medical care. We want everybody to have equal quality of resolving civil justice matters. We don't want people that have money to have a better day in court, and the people that are poor are probably 50% more likely to end up in jail. We don't want some people to easily fall into the groove of good paying jobs and health food stores and cars and mortgages and blah, blah, blah. And always a 60% of the population to be dragging behind and never making it for whatever reasons. To not want those things, to want everybody to have the best health care that's available in the world equally, instantly, without it being more complicated for one and more difficult to access for the other, is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. We have to look at humanity trying to organize itself. Unfortunately, when we say things like that, people are so conditioned to look for the enemy. Oh, that sounds like socialism, and we gotta hate communism. And it's nothing. It isn't that. You're calling it that. Who's called? Nobody called it socialism. You're afraid of that, and you're saying that I'm a socialist, and I haven't even said the word. You know how many times I've had arguments where I talk about ideas that would be better for everybody and for anybody, and people in Spanish and in English, in Argentina, Argentinians, or in America, they all do this. Oh, you lefties, and where does this come from? Where, how have these people learned to want to find so immediately their leftist socialist enemies, this group of people they're hounding, they got to look out for, they got to make sure that, or they got to peg you down as, how did they become that way? That's what I find very interesting. And the answer is very simple. Education. Years and years of years of, be careful, and Trump going out, oh, we're going to socialism, it's a bad thing, blah, blah, blah. And so now everybody who's there, yeah, we want somebody to, this, empty the swamp, and all these ideas get romanticized, and they start linking into something that makes sense, and before you know it, they have to adhere to that, and that their mind, instead of thinking of one humanity that's trying so many different things at once, and how are we doing, they're just going right away to look for the enemy and who's opposing them. That's why we're stuck. That's why we're stuck. Anyways, this Mike points out some things that I think everybody needs to learn, which is how can we, with what we got right now, break up the structure of government so that at least another party can have a chance Another party does not have a chance the way the United States is set up. Now, this is not something that something that people are concocting, the latest concoction by progressives or anything. No, there's lots of material that explain that it's in history books in high school. You can study this. How we were at one point a country that had a forum for three parties, or there were five or something, and they were sort of playing an even playing field. And then things happened that monopolized the whole thing into two competing, and now it's just gotten so bad. The thing about dualistic polarity or binary mentality is that it concentrates on the fight, it concentrates on the opposition, and it does nothing for understanding. Understanding in the Buddhist sense, enlightenment, understanding how this really is, how this came to be, what are all the forces that make that happen. Enlightenment. Enlightenment is something that contemplates a space, not a plane with two train, a flat surface with two trains heading for each other. Enlightenment and understanding is something that looks at the space in which life unfolds, and you pause and you contemplate, well, yeah, that is as such, that is like that, but it may not be that way, because if these things continue happening there, and if it doesn't make it over there before this comes up over here, it will not become what we're seeing, if perhaps it will. And that is existential reality. It's a space of changing circumstances at different speeds and different sizes and different purposes, all kind of coming into the sphere of existence. And that's why people who are very intellectual, very intelligent, who really understand the world a little bit, kind of don't rush to conclusions. They don't. They think a little bit, and they go off on tangents, or if they're spiritual, they'll really ponder and meditate a lot, because they realize that it's very hard to see reality. So the opposite of this is what these people are doing on Facebook. They're just wanting to fight. What Trump is doing. Biden. Jesus Christ! It just feels sorry for the guy, because it's like they're pushing him up there. Somebody's got to be the face, for us to continue not losing the place we're in. I don't know what's going on, but what is going on that matters to me is what Mike is talking about, which is that there are really a lot of people now who are talking about something else has got to take shape. And what he's explaining has got to take form and go forward. And what he's explaining is the actual nuts and bolts, is where we've got to go look and change things real quickly. If we can't do it this time, we don't have time to do it now. Maybe we do have 4 years in which we could really do it. If we all take the time to really understand how this machinery that is now completely stuck in a back and forth, it's like a washing machine. It only goes left, right, left, right, left, right. How can we unlock it so that it starts becoming more articulated and allows for truly higher political thoughts to come transform the leadership of the country? And so it behooves us all to learn what he's talking about. And that's why he made this video. And then he has some people say things afterwards, which is real good courtesy of him. But what he's saying is actually what we need to focus on and learn how it works. What is it that we have to change exactly? Where is the block? Where are the people? And be prepared to, because as soon, and he also says this, as soon as they start smelling that some intelligent people started aimed at the right place to unblock things, people don't want to lose where they're standing, their power, their money, the way the things are perfectly set up in their lives so abundantly and splendidly. They don't want to lose any of that. That's selfish human nature. Um, it's not about who's evil and mean, and it's just they come off sometimes really mean and evil because they sound so horribly selfish and self-serving. But we're just looking at a human being that could be you or me in a position where we didn't know what it is to not have. We didn't know what it is to really everything slip away from us, and just when you made a little step forward, it all collapsed, and you end up worse than you were 10 years ago. And these people don't know any of that. They've only known how to stay on, you know, uh, with the ship on, what do you call that? Viento en popa, with the um, wind on the starboard or something, keeping the boat up all the time. They're always floating on high sail. In a, when you look at these people, I don't even care to give names, but just everybody, Miss Clinton and Obama and Trump and Biden, all these people, they are just people that are just like you and me, except that they don't see, they haven't. It's like the same thing that it's really this simple. You've seen judges throw a 17-year-old for 40 years in jail because he robbed 3 times and he still doesn't get it. He keeps going to his uncle's friend to get something, and then the judge decided he's going to make an example of him and throws him 40 years in jail. And these horrible things that are happening in our judicial system. And you think to yourself, Jesus, you know what it's like to be at the mercy of what seems they're holding the perpetual lack of freedom like a key in front of your face. A state all of a sudden has the power to torment you for the rest of your life and maybe not let you out at all, ever. That's what it feels like. That feeling is terrifying if you've ever been in this situation in court. Even though you might logically be thinking, oh my God, are they going to give me 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 2 years? The feeling in your heart is that they can do whatever they want with you. And that feels like it could be a lifetime. It's horror, it's torment. I always think to myself, if that judge or if that district attorney were just for 10 minutes in that kid's shoe, just to feel that, just to feel tiny before something that wants to crush you, and it's really undeserving, it's really exaggerated, it's really unfair in the human sense. It doesn't want to be accountable for the society that we have our children grow up in. Refuse to look at how we have been doing this to our children, when punishing the individuals and have them bear everything that we have screwed up in our society and continue to proliferate through our culture and media and entertainment. And it's all glamorous and fascinating, isn't it? To have money and guns and fast cars and drugs. And then we turn around and some kid that is not so far from that, we put him 40 years in jail. It's totally, brutally unfair as a society, as a country. If that judge were in that kid's, for those 5 minutes, contemplating the smell of bleach and fluorescent lights that will never go off for God knows how many years, turned on top of it on a steel surface with bullies that, and knowing that is coming, and just his heart right here, thinking, is it going to be 1 year? Is it going to be 2 years? Is it going to be 10 years? And for that, if that judge could just stand there for that period and then go back immediately with a really lived experience as such, trust me, trust me, they would look down, they would feel ashamed, they would think, just something wonderful would happen, and they would start thinking, well, how can we get this person to change their lives, instead of trying to make an example and punish them as hard as we can. How can we help this person not be a prey and a victim of our society? And by the same principle, typically said if it was your own child, right? Is what applies to all of them. All of these people that we see, that we're entertained with watching, them running the show. Uh, it's the same. They can't, not because they're any different or less or more monstrous or anything, they're the same as us, but they just don't know. They don't know what it's like. They talk about it because they learn to talk about it. They learn, a family raising 4 kids, and we're going to do it. We're going to do right by the person who's worked hard, and blah 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 blah. Because they're all the things that we can build, we can understand. The logic is what makes sense, but they don't feel it. Because if they felt it, they wouldn't be rushing to confront, to fight, to win, to get ahead, they wouldn't be so, they would contemplate with more seriousness the possibility of losing power instead of desperatingly trying to make sure they keep power. They would say, oh, it would only be fair that maybe my time of, on top of the crest is over, and perhaps they would contemplate somebody else has to win. Those are the kinds of things that humanly come up when the other half. Normality. That's normality. What these people become, they become monsters, but not because they're monsters, because they really don't know any better. They only know that they got to continue. They have all the weapons in their hands to fight as hard as they can with all the connections that they have to make sure they don't lose any of what they've only known so far. Anyways, so watch this guy. I just made my video a lot longer than his. Sorry, but he's the one. He's the one that's giving the nuts and bolts. And I like it because it's the Humanist Report, and I do believe that a higher political concept will have to do with humanism. I have a friend in Argentina that believes that the next socialism has to be ecological, and there's something really interesting about that, which I can't talk about with him because it's really complicated and I kind of understand it conceptually. But basically, you can't force socialism or communism or any of these ideas of collectivity, shared equal plurality, ideas and concepts, without people understanding them on their own and putting the earth at the center as a purpose, as a cause for all people equally. This is not talking about money or work or, amounts of hours or amount of power or nothing. It's just saying whatever we come up with, we'll have to, instead of putting the state, making the state, taking the place of God, and sometimes monarchies do that, but anyways, it would have to be putting the earth and the health of all the ecological purity of balance and perfection of Gaia functioning at the center, like our holy fire that all of humanity equally organizes around. And then from that point, we can start talking about, okay, what does that mean? How to take care of our health, how to take care of our education, how to take care of our construction, our warmth, our housing, our venues of entertainment, our art, our creativity, or everything that all the governments have ever done. But instead of organizing it the ways even socialism and communism and Marxism have wanted to create so badly a system, and they fell into the trap or weakness of resolving the difficulty, because something a lot better will be that much more difficult. So a newer concept of government that resolves or that addresses all the things that are difficult to human nature will be a much more intelligent, complex concept that will be more challenging and difficult. And therefore, when things are more difficult and you become fanatically convinced that that is the way to go because perhaps they saw that. They only saw that. This happens to religious people. They feel something inside that is all, and they know that the truth is big and universal in there. And before they feel that everybody should see it, and it starts off pretty good, and then fanaticism and making people adhere to what you believe is better, even though you saw that it may be better indeed, is where the problems and the cracks and the faults and the flaws and everything, and then they ended up forcing it, and taking stuff away from people who worked, and no, it was all done badly, and capitalism won, not because it's better. It's riddled with injustice and horrible stuff, but it's better in that it makes people feel like at least they're suffering on their own time, and they have a chance to work against that suffering, and there's places and there are roads that seem to lead out of this, and it's something articulate, and it has forms, and it doesn't seem oppressive. There's a state that's very powerful, but it doesn't seem to be around, so it seems a lot better, and yet it is very much around, but I don't want to get into that, because I don't know enough, to be honest. I don't know enough to get into really complicated explanations. But it's important we understand that pluralistic, collective notions of administration and government and distribution for countries they're not a label. It's a better idea because so far we've failed. So far, all of humanity's governments and all of humanity's religions have failed in their ultimate prime. All religions have proposed something good for all of humanity equal, and yet all of them started separating those that don't believe the way we do. So they've all failed, because just like the United Nations failed, all governments fail. And that's where we got to start. That's where we got to start. And start, okay, let's see, would this fail so far? We designed it this far. No, it's not failing. Oh, would that work? Boom, potential for failure. So to create something really great, and for the first time something that actually works at maintaining all of humanity healthy and together, would probably be the biggest 1,000 billion times bigger than ever imagined endeavor and challenge we could give ourselves. But it's a good start to know that we haven't gotten anything right yet. That's a good start. That's where we should start. And creating a new party for America would be absolutely break the lock of combative ignorance and start talking intelligently again about conceiving new ideas of government distribution, of how to make things work, how to touch on every subject, new ways of resolving international conflict, international working together, exchanging resources through a new mentality is definitely what would free us, what would free us from being locked into those that don't know how to let go of power. And they would be all the wiser if they understood that they need to let go and let it happen, because ultimately it will benefit their children or grandchildren and everybody, including themselves, immediately. I mean, it all depends how deep you want to be about it, but when you let go of something that you're holding on to, it feels good immediately. A lot of my friends know that. So even immediately, if they saw it, they would feel better. But anyway, so watch the video. Watch the video. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for listening. Wait. Ciao.